Hello again and welcome to another Articulate Outburst podcast. Obviously we're doing a mini-series about the inspirations for the songs, where I draw most of that inspiration from clear contradictions in our society that we can clearly see, and basically what trouble that means for us. So obviously I mentioned the second album's Heroes and Bad Actors. There's some key songs on this album. Most of it is pretty much driven by the madness of what we see. So today I'm going to cover the media. Now, obviously you'll know I'm not a media expert. These podcasts are what they are, the ramblings of an old man, as the missus likes to refer to it. Kind of have to agree with her in many respects sometimes. But we are where we are. So in the last clip, in the last stream, I talked about the contradictions behind the green agenda. And in this stream I wanted to kind of cover just exactly how the media picks and chooses its stories. For ones that are kind of slightly unpalatable, for ones that it absolutely fawns over and loves. And obviously it'll come as no surprise that the BBC and the Green Agenda are working hand in glove with each other. I'm not really bothered about other privately owned networks such as Sky and CNN paddling a certain canoe because they're paid to do it, or it serves their owners' purposes. I 100% agree with that. I think if I owned my own newspaper, it'd be pretty much jumping about what I wanted people to listen to, a bit like this podcast. But either way, that's not what the BBC is. The BBC is a publicly funded organisation that's supposed to show things on both sides, and it only ever shows where climate change is concerned one side, and that is there's a climate emergency and we're all going to hell in a handcart. There's never any ever contradictory evidence against it. Any weird weather is reported as the four horsemen of the apocalypse are circling, we're all going to die, and it's this constant banging of this drum that if I was the one with the direct debit paying the BBC licence and not the missus, it'd have been cancelled ages ago. I don't actually watch the BBC, I certainly don't watch the news output. So I think that the BBC in its impartiality has kind of literally been corrupted. Don't know how, don't know why, don't need to know. I mean, it's obvious as as obvious as it is long. So the media have become more of a kind of a shill to sell the wares of the big power brokers, the NGOs, the Green Agenda, the big people. There's never any exposés anymore. Stories aren't covered that contradict this view, and this view is beaten. The drum just keeps getting banging to the point where we've got a load of young people that genuinely believe the world's going to end shortly. The Just Stop Oil movement, there's a hysteria, there's a zealous attached to them, a bit like the old preachers of the 19th century, the Methodist movement, the end of the world is nigh, repent ye sins. It's very, very, very similar to that. And it's been done by the constant noise. I mean, the weather map for Europe, in the days where it just showed yellow suns and that's where we were jetting off to and that's where we wanted to go, now it's almost like a maroon dark red. To put some sun cream on. Stay indoors. There's a thing called air conditioning. We didn't even have that in the 70s when you went abroad, but now I think every hotel in Spain's probably got air conditioning or you wouldn't stay there. So again, this is another classic case of all the tools that are available at our disposal, such as sun cream, advice, hats, wear a bloody hat, air conditioning, cool areas and everything else. But no, the BBC continues to tell you that you're going into an oven and you're all going to bake alive. There's a stupidity attached to it, and the fact that there is no corollary of view, or even if they portrayed somebody as a nutter. So there you go. So that's following on from the last stream of the Green Agenda. Now we're into the mess of the media and what it's come to represent. And the BBC's impartiality is the one thing that kind of bothers me now, because it's in lockstep with private companies such as CNN and Sky. It's like they all went to school together, they've all formed a view, and now they're all putting that view our way. And I just think it's just to the point where I just don't watch it anymore. It's just actually, you know what's coming, you know what they're going to say, and even the most tenuous links possible are towards that end. And in doing so, there's also a kind of a dereliction of duty to investigate other things that we want to know and love. Other things such as, now that the thing is gone, and I've got to be careful what I say with the old jibby-jabby thingamajig, because I guess that there's still rules and regulations of what you can and can't say about it, even though now it's just a distant memory. I pride myself on never having had the jab, but that's slightly different for me because I'd actually had COVID really bad at the start, and it was bad. I don't think I was going to die or anything, but I knew I'd been spoken, so. And then the second time I had it, which was the Omicron, that was just the most annoying cough for the longest period of time. But again, now it's a distant memory. But if you speak against it, then undoubtedly they'll have you off the platform. But what really kind of concerns me is now that obviously the cure's in place. We've had the cure, and now everybody's gone on to talk about other things such as the Ukraine war without really doing any kind of background checks. Putin bad, Putin mad, Zelensky good, Zelensky hero, and let's empty your pockets and all that money that you can possibly give us if you don't mind, please. So when they've gone on to that, there's a kind of a washout with the COVID vaccine in that the average deaths are still continuing to rise over the 5-year average. Nobody's looking into it, nobody's investigating it, nobody's even mentioning it in discourse. There's several people on YouTube that mention this clearly. I mention it pretty much all the time. The public don't want to know, but deaths from whatever it is that's not being investigated, that needs to be investigated, is driving things up 5 times, way above the 5-year average, way above. And that periodically from week to week changes. If you want to know more about this, can I suggest you look at Dr. John Campbell's streams. He's one of the few that's really banging the drum on this. But again, this is a story waiting to be covered. You've got to ask yourself, why is it not being covered? Why is it the idea of a scoop and a journalist coming out, oh, we've found something, or we've caught out the government, or we've exposed something, was the dream and hope of every journalist. And no, it's not. Now that journalist is, oh, that doesn't look very palatable, better not bring that up. And you're thinking, well, what is your job if it is not to bring up? I mean, on the BBC building in a George Orwell quote, in fact, I put it in one of our songs, 1984, what the kind of slogan above the BBC is, if liberty means anything at all, it's the right to tell people what they don't want to hear. That has been abandoned by the BBC. They don't do that anymore. At some point they're going to have to take that slogan off. It's going to be an interesting day at Media City in Manchester when they do, but they're going to have to do because they're not adopting that slogan in any adult sense. Why that is, you'd have to ask them, because if it's a public funded body, it shouldn't be influenced by anybody, politicians or big business. It doesn't have any advertising revenue, and there's a story in itself. Why would that be peddling the news that the big corporations are? When it's not a big corporation, it's independent, or supposed to be. Yet it seems to work in lockstep with those others to its eternal shame, for my money. So there are things that it doesn't really kind of like to get involved in. I don't really think it covered the Muslim grooming scandal in any adult sense either. I think probably the only corporation within its power to do so. I think that there's several things that have been overlooked. First of all, it's all still going on, obviously, and they won't cover that. And obviously, the fact that London's never had a case of it, ever, in the history of the world, tells me it can't possibly be right when it's affected every single major city in the UK. So again, another golden opportunity to investigate something that's very, very interesting. And really what we're going to need to know, if this is perfectly normal behaviour by a certain section of society, then they should come out and say that. That's their view, that's what they're entitled to that view. However unpalatable it might be for the rest of us, we brought them in, we brought them in. This is going to be the future. If we're going to live in a multicultural society, we're all going to be in our silos. This idea of an homogenous one, I think we can now slightly say has evaporated. But if we are going to be in our silos, we have a right to know what other people are thinking and why they're thinking that way. Yet the BBC is, again, another dereliction of its duty to do this. Yeah, it is awkward, but your slogan among media centre says that's what you should be doing. In terms of its kind of full interesting, when I realised that there was definitely something amiss with this, was when the Telford boys had been convicted. They'd actually been convicted and I think imprisoned on the Monday, and yet the papers brought out the news at 4 o'clock on a Thursday before a Good Friday, meaning the entire weekend cycle of news was missed. And I think that's when you start to think, hang on a minute, can't be by design, because if it had been brought out on a Monday, there'd been this channel had to cover it, that channel had to cover it, news and comment, question time, and then come back to the following bank holiday Monday, unless there's been a massive air crash or some other disaster, you're into the normal weekly news cycle again. So she couldn't help thinking that they'd buried that story where it wouldn't get coverage, held on to it for 4 days and then released it at a time when everyone was on holiday away for the Easter holidays or whatever. So again, another dereliction of duty, golden opportunity. Hang on, what's going on here? This is very, very interesting. I think one of the things that's never covered on this is the fact that some of those families members were married to the sisters of other people within the group. What does that say about the brother-in-law relationship when that activity within that family is perfectly all right for them to do? No one's investigated this. I think it should be investigated. I think it should be talked about. I think it should be aired. But the fact that it's not, and the fact that it's almost been kicked into the long grass on purpose, leaves more people curious to know why we're paying for our licence fee. This is news that the BBC needs to investigate, and we need answers on. So again, your kind of media is almost picking and choosing the things that it wants to talk about versus what the concerns of the general public are and what we want. I think we could go into the LGBTQ++ community, but I'll just refer you to Douglas Murray on this. I think Douglas Murray in the last week or so has just had some great interviews debunking the idea that there even is a gay community, which I think is quite an insightful thing. And the fact that the gays and the lesbians would have something in common with each other, and they certainly don't have anything in common with the trans people. To group all these people into like a bag of licorice all sorts, for me, is derogatory. I understand it's being used as a kind of, maybe as a kind of crowbar to leave a kind of power within the kind of society and stuff. I can see that happening. I can see it a top-down thing. I don't see it as a bottom-up thing. It's great for a corporation to put its arm around. Great for a corporation to virtue signal its credentials. But other than it being that, I don't really see how it exists. I think it exists as a touchy-feely way of, as I say, virtue signalling and appealing to a wider range of customers to say we care about this. Again, a bit like the BLM, which has obviously been consigned to history, having served its purpose. A lot of people could kind of trumpet that. Again, another news story that the BBC and other new media didn't cover, the fact that the BLM boys got away with a rafter door, very little changed, but on they went, on and off they went, and St George Floyd, as he's now known, has served his purpose for the short term. I think that they got it into I think they did really, really well getting it into the football stadiums during the lockdown, because if them crowds had been there, it wouldn't have been like it is. Now obviously it's morphed into something else, but it served its purpose. Virtue signalling, let's all be inclusive, doesn't quite work. There are some contradictions within this. And that's pretty much my annoyance, really. Certainly that's from a UK point of view, the UK media. Again, all working in lockstep, not when the BBC is an independent corporation, and they all have the same, pro-LGBTQ+, pro-green agenda, less said about multicultural, lack of harmony, no investigation into the small boats that I can see, no investigation into the million of people that have been given visas. So there are certain things that are just not covered, they're just not allowed to be covered. If they are allowed to be covered, they just choose not to. So when I wrote Sandstorm, it's it's a blight on the media, really, because it sort of like suggests that there's a big cloud of misinformation constantly purring around, and then there's obviously the odd truth that seeks through. And that's one of the kind of pivotal songs on the second album. We're actually in the recording studio in October to start recording some of these. 1984 is one of them, and obviously I've stuck in that quote that the BBC's got above its mantle about the right to tell people what they don't want to hear. If liberty means anything at all, it's the right to tell people what they don't want to hear, and that's been forgotten by the very corporation that's got it on their door. As for CNN, this kind of mostly peaceful protests when they were reporting on the BLM riots just saw nothing but fire, flames and cars being burned out. The Paris riots, again, very, very, how can I put this, sympathetically covered. People lost millions and millions of pounds, buildings were burnt down, historical landmarks destroyed, virtually nothing on the media. You know, again, because it's one of those subjects nobody wants to talk about. We all pretend that everyone's a peace-loving, misunderstood hippie. These people want different things. They will wipe their arse on our culture and our flag, and they will demand more and more and more, and we will give them more and more and more. But it still needs to be covered. It's still a job for someone to do in the media. I think it's important. Otherwise, we're just going to sleepwalking to areas we would love to have said 10 years' time, well, nobody ever told us. Well, nobody ever told you by design. Nobody's telling us by design. These boats have been waved in by the government. There's no doubt about that. There's no other explanation at all. But again, that's another thing that the media should be covering. Why is this happening? They get the transport minister out, they get the bloody foreign office and they want them here. Why have you got these people on TV? Why have they not got other voices that are saying this is why they want them here, to depress wages, keep wages low? You see these massive Amazon distribution centres setting up these big white blocks of anonymity. Someone's got to be in there. Someone's got to be moving those packages about. And I suspect it's those poor buggers coming over on the boats. It's the workhouses. The workhouses of the 19th century have been recreated in the here and now with slave labour. And that's another thing that no one's going to be looking at. The slave labour, some of these people in these plants, they're not even allowed to join a union. So the very corporations that go on about slavery and, you know, holding us to account for our slave past like we had out to do with it, like there's nothing we can do about it, are here pretty much waving it in for a new generation. Again, I've always said that history's circular. No, it's secular, should I say, not linear. That the problems of yesteryear are the problems of today. Technology moves. We can get from A to B faster, but the fundamentals of where we are seldom change. So there we go, that's another kind of quick one. I could have done another hour of this, media, what they should and shouldn't be covering, but again, we're a punk band. It's not my job to run the BBC, it's not my job to run any media organisation, but again, it's our job to point out the hypocrisies, to point out the dual standards, and obviously sing about it. But that's it, and thanks very much for listening. If you could like and subscribe, email me, ring me, my number's on the description. You can, anytime you can get in touch with me. If I don't answer straight away, it's because I'm on another call. But you will get me. In the description of the video, everywhere you can get hold of me is. I get a lot of emails. It'd be nice for one of you to ring me occasionally to solve the monotony of my day. Either way, thanks again for listening. If you could like, subscribe, ring the bell, share the video as much as possible, it'd be much appreciated, and I'll see you in the next one. Thank you.